Hello everyone and welcome to the guide for Black Rook Hold. Now this dungeon does have a lot of really interesting special mechanics, so bear with me. The first boss will throw a random weapon on the ground and the player needs to avoid that. Whether it's ranged DPS or healer, they'll be marked with a blue arrow on top of their head. And you see it here in the background, it is spinning. It was spinning on my healer. He does need to dodge that. Besides that, he will also target a random person in the group and make them drop mirror images that will detonate within 3 seconds. So if that's targeted on you, try to run around the edges of the room. Don't try to make that land on the tank. And the only other ability you see here is Reap Soul. Now what that does is it targets 180 degrees in front of him, and it is a giant, massive AoE damage dealing ability in front of him that needs to be dodged. Now once he starts casting it, everyone including the tank can run around and avoid that. So overall, don't get hit by the mirror images, don't get hit by the weapon, and don't get hit by Reap Soul. A pretty simple encounter as long as you know exactly what's going on. Here we see another Reap Soul. And all of the mirror images as well. Second boss. Now, this boss does have a lot of unavoidable damage. Now, one thing that all of the ranged and healers need to do is spread out as much as possible. You see here Brutal Glaive. Now what that does is it hits a random person. However, if there's anyone near them, it also bounces to them and does 100% of the damage. Besides that, he does do Fell Rush, which you see right here. He left a trail behind. So this will bounce between 3 people in your party. And basically, you just don't want to stand in the fire that it leaves behind. Besides that, in this phase, you also have Vengeful Shear, which does do a lot of damage to your tank. So your tank does need to avoid that damage, do some sort of mitigation ability when that is about to hit you. And then we see here the second phase. Now, the second phase does have I-beams, and you see here the I-beams are chasing me. I want to run around the edges of the room because I don't want to leave this trail in the middle of the room for everyone to burn up. Besides that, he does summon ads during this phase. You see here. The ads do a frontal cone stun. So if you can, just avoid it. Don't stand in front of those ads. Even the tank, when it starts casting, just run away from it. You see here the I-beams are on me again. I do want to run around the edges. And it can switch targets, so just be wary of that. You don't want the I-beams to be all over the melee DPS or your ranged DPS. Just try to keep it on the edges of the room. They do go away rather quickly, which is nice. And here we get another ground phase again. So again, split up, don't let that Brutal Glaive hit you, avoid the fire from the Fell Rush, and make sure you have mitigation up during Vengeful Shear. This next boss is relatively easy, doesn't do a lot of damage, does do a big knockback ability. When you see the energy get full on him, you do need to pop some sort of mitigation ability because he will hit your tank pretty hard. Besides that, there will be lasers pointing at the ground and that will become fire or actually vomit, and you do want to avoid that. You see the laser coming in here. I try to see where the gargoyle exactly is, and I do want to avoid that. So you see here, vomit comes in. Do not stand in that. I will move the boss. All of the melee DPS has to move out of it. Here we have another knockback ability. just make sure you can mitigate that. And another vomit over on the left. Now my positioning here is not the best, but still very acceptable. Alright, and here is the last boss, which is actually a very interesting boss. He will apply a bleed debuff to your tank that will last the whole fight, so just keep that in mind when you're healing your tank. Besides that, you do want to avoid this dark blast that happens. Now you do get like a 2 or 3 second warning beforehand. That's just this giant purple on the ground. Just avoid that. When you kill phase 1, he will turn into a demon lord. Now this phase is a lot more difficult. As you can see, I still have the bleed debuff that will persist throughout the fight. Now he will summon clouds that will put you to sleep. Now if you remember the Legion events and the Doomsayers, it's very similar. It's just a cloud that you need to avoid. It will put you to sleep and it'll make you take massive damage if you get hit by one of those shadow bolts. Here's the cloud being cast over on my right hand side. And it will persist for a while. Now here we have the Dreadlord's Guile incoming. Now what this does is it creates a ton of mirror images around the room, and you see here they will go counterclockwise. So one cast to the left, one cast to the left, one cast to the left. You have to avoid all of this. You do see here that the Shadow Priest does become asleep, and you see the amount of damage that she takes as a result of falling asleep and taking a few of these bolts. As a healer, if someone does fall asleep, it is dispellable, so you do want to dispel them so that they get out of there as soon as possible. It is a lot of damage that they are going to be intaking. The only other thing is he does do a Shadow Bolt volley, which causes low to moderate damage to the whole party. Thank you guys for joining me. I'll see you in the next video.